It is 2 in the morning and you are awake. The ceiling is familiar. The clock glows. Your mind is already cataloging what is wrong with you. Stress, age, too much coffee, not enough exercise. You have been taught that sleep is a single, unbroken arc from fatigue to alarm, and that waking in the dark is a failure of the body. 30% of adults in the developed world report symptoms of insomnia. Millions reach for a pill, a phone, a podcast, anything to force themselves back under. But here is a question worth sitting with. What if waking at 2 in the morning is not a malfunction? What if it is a memory, etched so deeply into human biology that 2 centuries of electric light have not been enough to erase it? In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, designed a simple experiment. He took a small group of volunteers and placed them in controlled rooms with no electric light for 14 hours each night, roughly matching a winter night at northern latitudes before the light bulb existed. No screens, no lamps, no glowing clock faces, just darkness. Within 4 weeks, every subject stopped sleeping in a single block. They fell asleep, slept for about 4 hours, woke naturally around midnight, lay quietly awake for 1 to 2 hours, and then slept again until morning. The waking interval was not anxious. The subjects did not toss or fret. Ware measured their hormone levels and found something unexpected. Elevated prolactin, the same hormone associated with the deep calm after orgasm or during breastfeeding. These people, lying in the dark in a government laboratory, had entered a neurochemical state of peaceful alertness that most modern humans never experience. A state with no name in contemporary life. Ware published his results in 1992. He had no idea that half a world away, buried in 16th century court records and 15th century medical manuals, the same pattern was waiting to be found. Roger Ekirch was not looking for sleep. He was a historian at Virginia Tech, researching nighttime culture in early modern Europe, crime, sex, what people did after the sun went down. And he kept stumbling over 2 phrases that appeared again and again in English language documents from the 1400s through the 1700s. First sleep and second sleep. Witnesses in court depositions testified that they awoke out of his first sleep and heard a noise. Domestic manuals advised householders to check the doors and rake the coals between the first and second sleep. Recipes for herbal remedies instructed patients to take the dose at the time of the first slep. No one explained the terms. No one needed to. The writers assumed their readers already knew. It took Ekirch 16 years to follow that thread through the archives. By the time he published his landmark article in the American Historical Review in 2001 and his full book at day's close in 2005, he had gathered over 500 references in English, French, Italian, Latin, spanning centuries of European life. In French, the terms were premier sommeil and second sommeil. In Italian, primo sonno. In Latin texts, concubia nocte, the dead of night, the interval between sleeps. Geoffrey Chaucer, writing in the 1390s, mentions sleeping after the first sleep in the Squire's Tale. A French physician named Laurent Joubert, writing in 1580, advised couples that the best time for conception was after the first sleep, when the body was rested and the mind calm. This was not a regional curiosity or a monastic eccentricity. This was the way Western Europeans slept for as far back as the documents can see. And here is what should stop you. Ekirch and Ware did not know each other. They were working in completely different fields, in completely different decades, with completely different source materials. One in archives filled with vellum and ink, the other in a darkened sleep laboratory wired with polysomnography equipment. They arrived at the same conclusion independently. Two sleeps, separated by a quiet waking hour in the middle of the night. The convergence was discovered after the fact when the two men became aware of each other's work. Think about what that convergence means. A pattern so embedded in human biology that it reasserts itself the moment you remove the artificial conditions suppressing it. And a pattern so thoroughly erased from cultural memory that its rediscovery in 2001 was treated as news. Now step into the interval itself, because the hours between the first and second sleep were not empty. They were among the most intimate hours of the day. Picture a house in England, 1590. It is January. The family, father, mother, two children, shares a single bed, the most valuable piece of furniture they own. The mattress is stuffed with straw laid on a rope-strung wooden frame. The blankets are wool. Cotton bedding does not exist yet in this world. That is centuries away. A tallow candle, animal fat with a wick, gives off a low, yellow, unsteady light and a faint smell of rendered grease. The fire in the hearth has been banked, embers raked under ash to keep them alive until morning. The father sits up. He is in a linen shift, not pajamas. Pajamas will not arrive in Europe from South Asia for another 250 years. The house is cold. His breath might be visible, but he is not alarmed. This is the watch, the interval, the time between. He checks the door. He feeds a stick to the embers. He sits, and in that sitting, in that quiet hour between one sleep and the next, something happens that the modern world has almost entirely lost. He thinks, not productively, not anxiously, not with a goal. He simply exists in the dark with his own mind, in a state that Thomas Ware's subjects would rediscover 4 centuries later in a laboratory in Bethesda. The Catholic Church knew this hour well. Monastic communities structured their entire days around the divine office, a cycle of prayers distributed across the 24 hours. Matins fell in the deep night, between midnight and 3 in the morning, and monks filed into cold stone choirs with their breath clouding in candlelight to chant. But it was not only monks. Lay prayer books prescribed specific devotions for the watch between sleeps. The Church did not invent midnight prayer. It recognized a biological reality and built a devotional architecture around it. And the Church was not alone. In Islam, the practice of tahajjud, voluntary night prayer performed between periods of sleep, is prescribed in the Quran and Hadith literature. Two religious traditions, developing independently across centuries, both built spiritual practices around the same human pattern. Biology came first. Theology followed. If you have ever wondered why the concept of a midnight vigil appears in so many traditions, this is part of the answer. The vigil was not an act of superhuman discipline. It was what happened naturally when people slept in long darkness. Sex, too. Laurent Joubert was explicit about this in 1580. The interval between sleeps was the recommended time for intercourse. The body had rested. The household was quiet. The children, sharing the same bed or the same room, were asleep. Medical advice, literature, and domestic manuals treated this as common knowledge. The interval was when couples had privacy in a world that offered almost none. And for the small minority who could read, the interval was something rarer still. Picture a woman in a late medieval household, perhaps a merchant's wife in Bruges or a minor noblewoman in the English Midlands. She owns a Book of Hours, the most commonly owned book in late medieval Europe. It is small, illuminated in blue and gold, and she reads it by a single candle flame, her hair uncovered because she is in bed, not in public. This is her time. The only hour of the day when the work is done, the household sleeps, and her mind belongs to herself. For most of history, the hours between the first and second sleep were the only truly private time most people had. So what killed it? Gas, then electricity, then everything. Ekirch traces the disappearance with a historian's precision. References to first sleep begin to drop out of English language sources around the 1820s. Gas street lighting arrived in London around 1812, starting along Pall Mall, a steadier, brighter light than any candle, pushing the inhabitable night later and later. By the 1880s, Edison's incandescent bulb was spreading through American and European cities. By the 1920s, the concept of first sleep appears to have vanished from urban vocabulary entirely. 1 century. That is all it took. A practice documented across 1,000 years of European life, referenced in Chaucer, in court depositions, in medical manuals, in prayer books, erased so completely that when a historian brought it back, it sounded like a revelation rather than a reminder. The speed of that forgetting deserves its own pause. What replaced segmented sleep was the consolidated 8-hour block. The model every modern sleep guide, every health article, every doctor's office pamphlet treats as the natural human default. Go to bed at 10, wake at 6, 8 hours, unbroken. Anything else is a disorder. But the 8-hour block is not ancient. It is a product of the same industrial revolution that gave us the factory shift, the time clock, and the expectation that human bodies should conform to mechanical schedules. The darkness that once stretched 14 hours in a European winter was compressed, first by gas, then by electricity, into a managed window of 7 or 8 hours, and sleep compressed with it. This is where the myth versus record pivot matters most. You have probably heard that humans need 8 hours of unbroken sleep and that anything less or anything interrupted is a problem to be solved. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends 7 to 9 hours for healthy adults, and that recommendation is grounded in real epidemiological evidence about the consequences of insufficient sleep. No one credible is arguing that sleep does not matter, but the word unbroken, that is the part that may not hold. Russell Foster, professor of circadian neuroscience at Oxford, has been among the most prominent voices arguing that the historical and biological evidence suggests human sleep is more flexible than the standard model allows. Waking briefly in the night, he and others have suggested, is not automatically pathological. The pathologization of normal nighttime waking, the anxiety it produces, the medication it triggers, may itself be part of the problem. You wake at 2, you panic, the panic floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, and now you genuinely cannot fall back asleep. The disorder is not the waking, the disorder is the fear of it. Now, a necessary pause for honesty, because this is where the evidence gets complicated and the script owes you precision rather than comfort. No randomized controlled trial has tested segmented sleep as a therapeutic intervention for insomnia. Vare's experiment was small and exploratory. The prolactin findings are real, but come from a limited sample. The claim that segmented sleep reduces cortisol spikes is an extrapolation, not a demonstrated result. Vare measured prolactin, not cortisol. And in 2015, a team led by Gandhi Yetish studied sleep patterns in 3 pre-industrial societies with no electricity: the Tsimane of Bolivia, the San of Namibia, the Hadza of Tanzania, and found no clear evidence of a 2-sleep pattern. Those populations averaged 6 to 7 hours of sleep, closely tied to temperature cycles, without an obvious waking interval. Does this disprove Ekirch? Not necessarily. All 3 of those societies live near the equator, where dark periods run roughly 11 hours, far shorter than the 14-hour winter nights of Northern Europe that Ekirch studied and Vare simulated. Segmented sleep may be a response to long darkness specifically, not a universal human default. The debate is genuine, and credentialed researchers hold both positions. What is not in debate is the historical record. 500 references, multiple languages, multiple centuries. The segmented pattern was real in Europe, and it was not a footnote. It was the norm. And here is what I want you to carry forward, because this is the part that reaches past history and past science into something personal. Think about the last time you woke in the middle of the night. Not from a nightmare, not from a child crying, not from a car alarm. Just awake, eyes open, the house quiet. And think about what you did. You probably checked your phone. The screen hit your retinas with blue dominant light at roughly 450 nanometers, the precise wavelength most effective at suppressing melatonin, the hormone that tells your body it is still night. You scrolled. You read something that made you anxious. You checked the time and calculated how many hours remained before the alarm and felt the math like a weight on your chest. Now consider the alternative that existed for centuries before you were born. You wake. The room is dark, truly dark, in a way you have perhaps never experienced. No LED indicators, no street light through the curtains, no ambient urban glow. Just darkness and quiet. Your body is producing prolactin. You are calm. You are not supposed to be doing anything. You lie still, or you sit up, or you speak quietly to the person beside you. You pray if you pray. You think if you think. You exist in the only private hour the day has given you, and then, without effort, without medication, without a podcast engineered to simulate rain, you drift back into your second sleep. If that sounds peaceful, it is because it was. The historical sources describe it that way, and the laboratory data confirms it. What was lost was not just a sleep pattern. It was an entire mode of human experience. A nightly hour of unstructured, unhurried, chemically peaceful wakefulness that modern life has replaced with anxiety and blue light. I want to be careful here, because the point is not that you should throw away your alarm clock and sleep in 2 shifts. Modern work schedules make 14-hour dark periods impossible for most people, and the clinical evidence for segmented sleep as a medical prescription simply does not exist yet. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine has not endorsed it. Your doctor's advice still matters. But the point that does hold, and it is a point grounded in both the archives and the laboratory, is that waking in the night is not necessarily broken. It may be ancient, it may be biological, and the worst thing you can do when it happens may be exactly what the modern world has trained you to do. Panic, medicate, and flood your quiet body with the anxious certainty that something is wrong. The next time it happens, consider lying still. Consider the dark. Consider that for 1,000 years, your ancestors woke at this same hour and did not call it insomnia. They called it the watch. They called it the first stirring. They called it the time between. And then they went back to sleep. If this changed how you think about your own nights, I would like to hear what you do in your own waking hours. Whether you have experienced this pattern, whether you have fought it, whether you might stop fighting it. The comments are where that conversation lives. There is a 16th century domestic manual, author unknown, that advises householders to check their doors and rake over the coals between the first and second sleep. It is a small instruction, practical and unremarkable, written for people who understood without being told that the night had a middle, and that the middle was for living in. That manual has survived longer than the practice it described. The coals went cold. The gas lamps came. The light bulb finished what the gas lamp started. But the biology remains. Somewhere beneath 2 centuries of electric light and alarm clocks, and sleep hygiene articles telling you what normal looks like, the old pattern is still there. Ware proved it. Ikirch found its paper trail. And tonight, at 2 in the morning, in a quiet bedroom somewhere, someone will wake and stare at the ceiling and wonder what is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them. They are remembering. If you want to keep following stories like this one, places where forgotten history meets the body you actually live in, subscribing is how you make sure the next one finds you. There is more to recover than you think.